Hello, welcome to this month's WCMA member webinar. That's Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association. Today we're going to focus on immigration enforcement and preparedness. I'm Grace Atherton. I'm WCMA's Communications Director. Happy to welcome you today. And before we get started, I'd just like to cover a couple of housekeeping notes. First, please make sure your mic is muted and your camera is off to avoid interruptions during our webinar. If you have questions at any time during our session, you're welcome to put those in the chat, and we will do our best to address all of those at the end of our session during Q&A with our presenters. And finally, I want to remind you that a recording of this webinar, as well as a list of helpful contacts and resources, will be sent out to all registered attendees within the next day or so. So please watch for that. And if you miss anything during the presentation, just know that you will get a link to that recording afterward. With that, let's take a quick look at our agenda. We have a lot of great content for you today, very informative, so I want to make sure we have time to dive into all of it. First, we're going to cover updates on new orders, execution of current orders, and just some current events. We want to bring you the latest on what's happening in this realm. The news is ever changing, so it's important to stay up to date. Then we'll walk through WCMA's immigration enforcement preparedness tool that we've developed in partnership with WCMA member Michael Vest and Friedrich. And then we'll move to best practices for external communications. And we have our friends from MorganMyers joining us for that today. And finally, as I mentioned, we'll move on to Q&A at the end of our session today. So again, if you have questions throughout, please feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of today's webinar. With that, I'm going to turn things over to WCMA's Senior Director of Programs and Policy, Rebekah Sweeney, who's going to kick things off for us. Rebekah?
Thanks so much, Grace, and thanks to everyone who's joining us today. We do have a timely topic for today's webinar. Across the country, immigration enforcement actions are making headlines, including workplace raids, farm visits, and stepped-up audits from ICE. For dairy processors, these developments matter deeply because our supply chain starts not only with cows, but also with people. And I want to just set the stage with some facts. Next slide. The U.S. dairy industry depends heavily on immigrant labor, and some studies estimate that roughly half of all dairy workers in the United States are immigrants. That means every other person milking cows, hauling milk, or working in plants or on farms is foreign-born. And here's a statistic that to me is even more striking. Farms that employ immigrant labor produce nearly 80% of the nation's milk supply. If those workers were suddenly removed or too fearful to report to work, production would fall dramatically, and the ripple effects would hit processors, retailers, and consumers alike. ICE activity on the ground, even when it doesn't touch your facility directly, can quickly disrupt your operations and your milk supply. And let's explore why we are seeing more ICE activity in recent months with a look at Trump administration orders. On his first day in office, President Trump issued Executive Order 14159, which was entitled Protecting the American People Against Invasion. Now, this order declares that agencies must faithfully execute immigration laws against all inadmissible or removable non-citizens. It revokes several of the Biden-era orders and related guidances on civil immigration priorities. It directs the Department of Homeland Security to ensure alien registration and treat failure to register as an enforcement priority. And it also empowers expanded use of expedited removal. That means we're going to get you out of this country right now. Also on January 20th, a busy day for executive orders, the president issued Order 14160, which was protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. This directive attempts to restrict or reinterpret birthright citizenship, especially for the children of undocumented immigrants or for people who are on temporary visas. Although I want to note that this has been challenged and blocked in multiple courts. Then the president issued a companion order called Securing Our Borders, which emphasizes the use of physical barriers, including, let's say, border walls, prioritizes detaining non-citizens rather than sort of the catch and release policy of past administrations, and establishes stricter parole and asylum limits. It also calls for agencies to resume or strengthen something called migrant protection protocols, which in plain terms means sending migrants back to their birth country while they are awaiting processing. In April, President Trump rolled out an executive order titled Protecting American Communities from Criminal Aliens. This targets jurisdictions, that's states or municipalities, that are labeled obstructing enforcement. So we might call them sanctuary states or sanctuary cities. It mandates a publication of a list of those jurisdictions. It's about 200 of them, and orders federal agencies to suspend or terminate funding to those jurisdictions. Also commands the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security to pursue legal remedies against non-compliant jurisdictions. A couple of other key developments that I also want to throw in the mix. Just last month, the president issued an order restricting entry of certain H-1B visa holders unless they're accompanying their application by $100,000 supplemental payment. For some people, that would be a significant hill to climb. For others, maybe not. In June, he released Proclamation 10949, restricting entry of foreign nationals. This bars entry of people from about 12 countries under national security justifications. And then finally, in August, I wanted to note that the Trump administration announced a pause on work visas for foreign commercial truck drivers. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in a brief social media post that drivers from other countries are, quote, endangering American lives and undercutting the livelihoods of American truckers, end quote. After his post, the State Department then clarified that that pause actually only applies to 3 visa categories, which is H-2B visas, which is a significant population of drivers every year. E-2 visas, not very significant, and EB-3 visas, again, not very significant. They also clarified that Mexican and Canadian truck drivers in the country operating with B-1 visitor visas are explicitly not impacted. All of these orders and actions underline key priorities for the Trump administration, and he is making good on campaign promises related to immigration. Multiple reports indicate that the administration had set aggressive ICE arrest targets, perhaps 3,000 per day in early 2025. While we have not seen that level yet, we are seeing increased arrest rates. And while there was back and forth within the administration, there is no exemption for agriculture or food processing. Some of you might remember that conversation that hit early in the summer in June. Here's a look at some of the raids that have happened on farms or in processing plants. A raid on Pleasant Valley Farms in Franklin County, Vermont in April resulted in the detention of 8 dairy farm workers by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agents. 4 workers were deported to Mexico, and the status of others remains uncertain at this time. In June, ICE agents raided Glen Valley Foods, which is a meat packing plant in Omaha, Nebraska, detaining nearly 100 workers suspected of being in the U.S. illegally and using fraudulent ID to get those jobs. In May, a raid at Lynette and Sons Agricultural Company in Orleans County, New York, saw 14 workers detained. 4 have been released on bail, but the rest were deported to their home countries. And 3 months later, so this summer, ICE revisited the farm, taking another 7 workers from Mexico and Guatemala into custody. Now, not exclusively dairy in every case, but the agricultural raids in Ventura County, California in July, which made a lot of news, led to the detention of more than 200 people. And sadly, 1 laborer died after a fall while attempting to flee. A raid in August targeted a dairy in Lovington, New Mexico, resulting in 11 arrests, and that dairy temporarily shut down because so many workers had been removed. In September in Wisconsin, for all of those members that are operating in Wisconsin, you may know 24 people, all dairy farm workers, were arrested in Manitowoc County. Some workers, up to 6, had criminal histories, but others did not. Also in September, ICE raided the Nutrition Bar Confectioners Factory in New York, detaining over 70 workers. That raid, which targeted a workforce predominantly of Latino origin, involved agents gathering workers in a break room and separating them by ethnicity, although many were legal residents or held work permits. Despite claims from federal authorities about pursuing criminals, the factory owners stated their employees were legally documented and only administrative warrants were used in that operation. All this to say, there is a significant amount of activity that's happening in the agricultural community and in the food processing community. We don't share this to scare you, but we want you to be aware, and you are in the right place because it is important that you are prepared for potential action. A couple of other things that we wanted to note to you today, that while we are seeing increased arrest quotas and a lot of focus on interior enforcement, very different from the conversations of the first Trump administration, where it was build the wall, and we're really focused on border enforcement. We've, I guess, as a country, sort of said, we've got that secured, so now we're going to focus on finding people. And in many cases, we're finding them on farms or in processing facilities. Another thing just to kind of note, and you kind of heard me say this when I was talking about some of the cases individually, there's a lot of discussion about how we need to remove the criminals, the people who have committed a crime other than being in this country illegally. But the data shows that 70% of detainees have no criminal conviction. So we're not talking necessarily about people who have done something we would all consider wrong. We're all concerned about safety and security, right? And there's a decent justification for removal of people with those criminal histories. But many of them have no criminal history other than not having the correct paperwork. The other thing that I want to note is that there is no sign right now that the federal government shutdown, which as of this webinar right now, next slide, is on day 9. And that shutdown is not slowing ICE down. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, it's a big priority for this administration. And that was evidenced by the spending package that largely Republicans approved earlier this year. Some of you may have heard it called the One Big Beautiful Bill. And it approved an additional $170 billion for immigration enforcement, which will certainly keep ICE moving for many months, even if that shutdown continues for a while. Within that $170 billion is $51 billion to keep building those border walls, $45 billion to expand detention capacity, $30 billion to support ICE enforcement action and removal processes for those migrants, and $13.5 billion to reimburse states that are partnering with ICE on enforcement. The rest is also related, but those are really the big chunks of funding, and that's really what's driving ICE enforcement action today. WCMA to this point has not publicly weighed in on ramped up enforcement activities or increased arrest and deportation rates, but we have long advocated for immigration reform. That should include the addition of dairy manufacturing, processing, and related supply chain jobs to the list of those eligible for an agricultural guest worker visa program. It includes an elimination of touchback provisions that require guest workers to return to their home country periodically, which disrupts their work here in the United States. It should include the provision of temporary legal status for spouses and minor children of non-seasonal agricultural guest workers, an extension in the length of an agricultural guest worker visa, and at-will employment flexibility in an ag worker program that would allow someone to accept any position, any employment within the agricultural field for the duration of their work authorization period. We don't want people locked into one employer only just because that's who helped sponsor them and initially hired them in this country. Everyone should be able to make a competitive wage. Finally, we also advocate for incentives to aid in the provision of optional employer-provided housing and transportation, an expansion of opportunities for guest workers to gain permanent residency. We're hearing from people who are waiting 5 or 7 years to get a hearing, and the terms of their visa might be 3 years. So we have a systematic problem in this country with immigration and creating opportunity for workers to be here in this country. And then finally, strong legal safeguards for employers acting in good faith to determine an individual's eligibility for employment. In short, dairy needs an immigration visa program that assures food security, strengthens our rural communities, and helps keep U.S. dairy production strong and growing. So now, while the work that we do on advocacy must continue, we also want to provide you with practical resources to meet the needs of this very moment. And that's why we partnered with a supplier member in the legal field, Michael Best and Friedrich, to offer you an immigration action preparedness tool. Here today to walk us through that tool is my friend, Kelly Fortier. From Fortune 500 companies to startups, she works with everybody. She helps employers meet their staffing needs by handling the immigration issues that they have, whether they're trying to hire someone who's coming from another country or whether they're tackling some of these other issues. She also handles compliance issues for corporations. Again, really businesses of all sizes. As especially they try to expand their operations and pad their workforce with people from other places. She provides clients with immigration law compliance advice, including I-9 compliance checks, E-Verify, and Social Security number issues. She is a person that leads with her head and with her heart in all things, and we are really fortunate to have her working with a number of WCMA member manufacturers and processors and working with us here today. So Kelly, I just want to thank you so much. I know you've been busy as of late. Thank you for making time to join us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It certainly has been an interesting 9 months. My personal workload has really shifted to this enforcement problem, I would say, for a lot of employers or concern. So happy to have the opportunity to maybe give you all some tools to feel better prepared and less anxious if ICE or any other government official shows up at the work site. So we kind of think of these as like, what can you do before? What are you going to do during? And then what are things to think about after an ICE visit? And I'm going to say visit and not raid, because chances are you won't receive this large scale raid, but you should certainly be prepared for individual visits and arrests. So some legal preparation you can do. Next slide. It's important that you have an attorney or you can consult with an attorney about your immigration compliance and someone that could be on call if and when ICE does show up. The role of the attorney doesn't have to be great, but can really help ICE stay in its lane and also help you through pre-visit and post-visit issues, such as settlements and negotiations. The other thing you can do is look at your I-9 forms. Those are the forms that everyone fills out when they start a job, review documentation. The vast majority of employer-focused ICE activities are I-9 audit-focused. And I can tell you, just since January, we track this data, we track these numbers. We think the number of I-9 audits that have happened this year are about 3 times as much as they were last year. I personally have seen them almost back to back in some months. So look at those I-9s, audit them, make sure they're as good as they can possibly be. Finally, have some information available to employees that might have questions about their immigration status or their family's immigration status. We have some listed here that are great resources, serve communities in Wisconsin, Minnesota, throughout the country. We don't want you as employers to give legal advice. Like, immigration is complicated. You don't want to tell someone the wrong thing, but you certainly are. It's really nice if you can give them access to good legal resources. Slide. Workplace readiness. This is, I think, more of the meat of the discussion today. Next. First and foremost, make sure you have a plan. In the heat of the moment, no one's going to remember exactly what to do if you're dealing with an 8-page policy about how to handle government visitors. You really want a short, focused plan on what to do if ICE shows up. Make it easy to understand, easy to read, easy to follow in the heat of the moment, and easy to learn in advance of a potential visit. Practice that plan. So who's going to be the person meeting ICE at the front desk or meeting ICE at the gate? Who's going to be the managers that might answer their questions? Those are all individuals who should know the plan and practice the plan. Related to that, think about who those key contacts are going to be at your organization. when we develop these plans, we like to have almost a call tree. Okay, first you're going to call the owner. If the owner's not available, then you're going to call the manager. Okay, if that manager's not on duty, call the next manager. And also thinking about if you're a multi-shift employer, having the right contacts for the right shifts. You want someone with decision-making authority to be available as quickly as possible when you see ICE arrive on site. Think about which areas of your property and facility are public areas and which are private areas, and label them. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Related to that, think about where you would want an ICE agent to wait. So while you ask the agent questions, while you try to figure out what's going on, where do you want them to wait? Is there a conference room? Is there a lobby area? Is there a place in front of a building that would be appropriate? And then also think about who is authorized to give consent to enter the facility. Primarily, owners of properties have that authority. They can say, yes, you can enter this private area even without a warrant. Your receptionist probably doesn't have that legal authority, but maybe your key manager does. So think about, okay, if we were going to give consent, who has the ability to give that consent? Next slide. So I talk about public and private because it's so important in the context of ICE and really any other government official showing up. When we think about public spaces or private spaces, really what we're thinking about, what's the expectation of privacy? Is this an area where that you expect to remain private or not? So public spots typically will include lobbies, retail spaces, and most parking lots. Unless you have a gated parking lot or a secured parking lot, you can almost assume that parking lot's going to be a public area. On the other hand, we have private areas, and I think most locations within an employer's property are going to be private. So that'd be employee break rooms, your offices, processing spaces, packaging spaces, where you're getting intake of materials. Those are all going to be considered private, especially so if you label them as such. Grace, we can go to the next slide. So why do we care so much about public versus private? It all has to do with warrants. ICE cannot access private spaces without a judicial warrant or without consent from the property owner or the key employer contact. And that might feel odd, right? to think about a government agent showing up, wanting to get into a space without the legal authorization to do that, but that can happen. And so it's really important to think about, okay, ICE is here, where can they go? Where I can't say, hey, hands off, go away, and where can't they go? Most of the arrests and raids and, whether it's on work sites or in parking lots or in private residence, most ICE officials are showing up with administrative warrants. And administrative warrants do not allow ICE to go into private areas. So what is a judicial warrant? What is an administration warrant? A judicial warrant is a warrant that's issued by a state or federal court. It has to be signed by a judge, and it has to contain a detailed description of exactly who or the location to be searched. So I always look at the heading, right? What's the heading on that? Is it a court heading? It's probably a judicial order. Also look at that description. Most times it'll be a specific address, and even within the address, it might list a specific building. I've even seen them with pictures of the location attached to it. An administrative warrant, on the other hand, is issued by any federal agency. So DHS, ICE, they'll issue these administrative warrants. It's not signed by a judge, it's not issued by a court. Typically only a name is listed. It gives individuals the authority, or ICE the authority, to pick up a person listed on that administrative warrant, but not in a private space. Next slide. You could also get a request for documents, so a subpoena. or a notice of inspection if they want your I-9 forms. Make sure you do engage an attorney if you get either one of these. The subpoenas can sometimes be challenged. Notice of I-9 inspections, we can sometimes negotiate deadlines and certainly can negotiate penalties. So definitely places where you want to engage an attorney. And then make sure you take a copy of any documents before you turn them over if possible. It might be months or years before the government returns them to you. Next slide. And then training. Train whoever's involved in this process on these things. So your receptionist needs to be trained, your security people need to be trained, your frontline supervisors need to be trained, your owners need to be trained. You don't necessarily have to train every employee though. It's important that employees know you have a plan, but they don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs if they're not going to be part of that plan. Next slide. All right, so ICE shows up. What do you do? First and foremost, remain calm. ICE is typically showing up with guns, with multiple vehicles, with multiple agents. It is a very stressful situation. But the calmer you can be, the better it's going to go for you and your employees. There's a lot of questions we're going to want you to ask. Make sure you're asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and make sure you're recording answers. So writing down what's happened or even videoing, that is allowed. As I mentioned before, you can limit access to any private areas unless there's a judicial warrant. So public areas they can be in, private areas not. Call your attorney, and then make sure you have people with those agents at all times. And we really want at least 2 people to be observing what's happening, writing down what's happening, and listening to what's happening. Next slide. Some key questions to ask. And I would, as you train for this in practice, these are questions to even practice. Just say them out loud. Ask for the name of the agents, ask for their badge numbers, ask for identification. Legally, they should be providing you these things. I say legally because in practice, we are not seeing that happen. We are seeing a lot of ICE agents and CBP agents saying, hey, I'm not going to give you that information. Here's my supervisor's name and phone number. Call them. Sometimes they do, and certainly ask for it and make a note that you've asked for it. Ask them why they are at your location. Why are they at your business? They could simply be doing a community outreach to encourage you to sign up for E-Verify. We saw that in Chicago earlier this year, door to door. Hey, here's information on E-Verify, thanks. They could be looking for one specific individual. They could be wanting to audit your I-9 forms. So I think don't necessarily react like they're coming in for a full-scale raid. It might be something much more minor than that. And we don't want to jump to conclusions. Ask if they have a warrant, ask if they have a subpoena. Very important. We also want you to ask them, first tell them, but then ask them if they're going to comply with your safety protocols. As you all know, in our industry, it is very important that we have our production spaces safe. There's food safety rules, biohazard issues, employee safety issues. Let the agents know about that and ask them to confirm they're going to comply. They're not USDA agents. They probably don't know what they're dealing with in a cheese manufacturing facility, for example. So take the opportunity to educate if you can. If you have an employee arrested, ask where that individual is being taken. The agent will not be real forthcoming, but I would just say, please continue to ask. We want to know where the individual goes so you can have their family members track them later. And then you can also ask, guys, what is the next step for this person? Where will they be? How long will they be there? Will there be a bond hearing? Next slide. Your employees have rights, but they're not unlimited when they're not US citizens. Any non-US citizen should carry proof of their lawful immigration status, and that includes green card holders, work visa holders, people with EADs, TPS. That is technically a law. It's never been enforced before, or very rarely, but now, given the widespread arrests that are taking place just based on accent, skin color, location, really important to bring those documents around. If the employee is arrested, they have the right to remain silent. They have the right to legal counsel, not paid for, but they do have that right. Know they can be transported from the state, and that can happen within 48 hours usually, and they may be eligible to get out by bond. So you, as their employer, you don't want to give them legal advice, and you don't want to tell them not to talk to ICE, but you can remind them of their rights. Next slide. So after ICE leaves, what should you do? Take a few minutes, write down notes of what happened, share those materials with your attorney, and then debrief. Debrief with your attorney, debrief with the staff that were involved with it. What could you do better? What areas of your plan didn't go well? Which did? This is your time to look at those. Next slide. So that was a lot of information. We want to make sure we leave enough time for questions, so I ran through that. But when you're thinking of this as a whole, some key takeaways. If you remember one thing, be prepared. Please consider putting together a short policy that can help you, and really think about an I-9 audit. If you don't have a large HR staff, if you only have one or two people that do I-9s, I would highly encourage you to use an outside I-9 audit provider, an attorney that's very experienced with this. Our firm does this. We have a very reasonable place, just flat fee for an I-9 audit. Another set of eyes can help you spot ongoing problems. As you plan for this eventuality or possibility, make sure you're training your employees on that. During an ICE action, stay as calm as you can. Assert your rights. Your employee can assert their rights. Do it respectfully, but do it. Document everything. If in the moment you're not writing fast enough, as soon as people leave, write it all down. In the heat of the moment, things fly out. The memory gets less reliable, so the sooner you can get it on paper, the better. Share that documentation with your leadership team, share that documentation with your attorney, and think about, should we adjust our practices, or do we have some legal liability we now need to worry about? And that, I think, is a good time for me to talk about emergency contacts. If you need assistance during an ICE raid or an ICE visit, I am always available to you all. My phone is on 24/7. You can reach me there. These raids typically happen during shift changes, so at unusual hours. So don't worry if it's not a 9 to 5 visit. We are available. Rebekah?
And Kelly, I just want to emphasize the generosity of that offer. Kelly is a busy and smart human being and much in demand. And we've seen her spring into action for members that are not even contracted with Michael Best to be helpful. And I also want to echo, I think just about everybody in industry has my cell phone number now. It's my personal one. And I do care about what you care about. All of us do at WCMA. So if you have a concern or a question, or somebody shows up on your doorstep, don't hesitate to give us a call anytime, day or night. We are here for you as well. Kelly, I just want to thank you so much for a jam-packed presentation. She's going to stick around for questions at the end, and I do see some coming into the chat, which is wonderful. But for now, I'll pass it back to my colleague, Grace.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rebekah, and thank you so much, Kelly, for that great information. Next, we're going to turn to the public-facing side, if you will, of this event of an ICE visit or an ICE raid. So we've talked through some practices and checklists that you should go through as a business. Now we're going to talk about what happens when that information maybe becomes public. How do you handle that external communication? And for that, we're going to turn to Eric Davis of MorganMyers. Eric is Vice President of Food and Beverage for MorganMyers. He has more than 20 years of experience in both consumer-facing and B2B food communication strategy and PR for a wide range of both food and farm-centric clients. So he is well positioned to help us walk through kind of the overview of the best practices for external communications in a situation like this. So with that, I will turn it over to Eric.
Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you all for your time. I personally am just very grateful and happy to be a part of such a wonderful panel with Kelly, Rebekah, of course, Grace. So many times with when we're talking about issues management or external communications, we're in a silo. We're not on the same presentation with legal or employee relations or association management. And it's so important, especially in this situation, the ICE situation that we're talking about today, that we all are together on this, because this is an issue that weaves in and out of legal into community relations, into employee relations, into associations being an important support mechanism for everyone here. So again, so happy to be a part of this, and thank you again. Well, a lot of what we'll share here too will mirror a lot of what Kelly said, and that is because these issues are concurrently legal and communications issues at the same time. I also want to too, and you'll see this later in the presentation, any advice given, anything that conflicts slightly with what Kelly said or veers a little bit, please default to Kelly. Please default to legal in all situations here. I just want to make very important. I actually say that later in the presentation here because this is such a delicate issue. But again, today's topic here is about crisis readiness and very much focus on what to do before ICE knocks on your door, but also what to do while it's happening and a little bit after that too. And I think the topics that we cover today are very important for ICE, but it could be important for other issues as well as you plan out your communications for the year ahead, or as you plan out your communications for the weeks ahead as well. We'll go to the next slide. So why crisis readiness from a communications standpoint? And we always like to say, most organizations here have a food safety plan, they have data recovery plans, they have succession plans. But many, and you know where to go and to grab that food safety plan or that data plan, but you may not have a crisis communications plan, and even more specific, a plan specifically related to this issue that we have at hand here. So that's why we want to talk about this today, about having crisis communications readiness. We'll go to the next slide. And I think we've reinforced it here enough, but immigration enforcement is an imminent scenario now. It's no longer what we would call horizon issues, which is scenarios that could happen down the road. It is impacting us. We saw it in Manitowoc a few weeks ago. It's happening in other places, and things can just change in a matter of minutes. Your people, your product, your brand, your reputation, it could all be under scrutiny, if state scrutiny, if not national scrutiny, at any given moment, particularly with this. And it's not, we don't want to create fear or anything like that. I might sound a little alarmist here. It's just this, it's not a question of if a crisis will happen, it's how prepared you are. It's not a question of if or when, it's all about just, are you prepared? Do you have the materials in place for when something like this happens? So go to the next slide. And what we want to cover here today is really what this means. Some key elements here. It's being accurate. It's being consistent in your communications when something happens. So a crisis-ready organization, again, accurate and consistently. You'll have a documented and available plan in place, one that's easily accessible. You know what the roles are of everyone in the communications tree, reinforcing a lot of what Kelly said here. You'll have pre-written materials, pre-messages drafted and already approved in advance. You understand what everyone's roles are, and you will have a designated communications voice for either or both internal and external audiences. Let me rephrase that. You'll have a designated voice for internal audiences, and you'll have a designated voice for external audiences. Sometimes it's the same person, but you will have people that are focused and know what to say to your employees, but also external audiences as well. Again, as we're saying, we can't control the ICE incident, but you can control your response as best as you possibly can. So how do we get there from a communication standpoint? We'll go to the next slide. We have this, and you'll have a copy of this, but we call it having a readiness playbook. And there's 6 key steps here that we'll break down. One is to build your crisis communications team, conduct scenario planning, prepare that plan and messages in advance, map out exactly who your key stakeholders are. Number 5 is very important here, what to do and say, or also not say as well, from a communication standpoint. And lastly, again, reflecting back to something Kelly said earlier, a very important part of the playbook is having communications and legal partners in place prior to something happening. So we'll break these down one by one here very quickly here. Your crisis communications team should have internal leads, your owner, your CEO, the highest person there that is visible within the organization, your HR lead, a plant manager, your communications and marketing team members, external experts, your attorney, an external communications advisor, an industry association, of course, as we have here with WCMA, and then 2 designated spokespeople, ideally people trained and calm under pressure, a pilot and co-pilot. And the reason that we always say have 2 designated spokespeople, believe it or not, we've seen it happen many times. People have been on vacation, someone got sick, something happened, and your main person just could not be available. So always have an understudy or a co-pilot is a better phrase for that, for any issue that might arise. Knowing who to talk to, who they are, and what their role is will eliminate confusion, because that will damage your credibility in a crisis situation. Go to the next slide. This is something that reveals a lot of gaps, and it is naturally so, and it's conduct scenario planning. It's as simple as your team holding a 1-hour tabletop exercise, and you have 3 to 4 what ifs, where you actually have a meeting, cell phones off, phones are off, no screens, and you're talking. What would happen if ICE arrests people at your facility and there's video of it and it goes viral, and then a reporter calls and asks for a comment, and then advocacy groups hold a press briefing or protest or some kind of action outside of your facility? That's one scenario. That's one what if. Start talking about other ones as well. Who would you call? What would you say? Who would be the person that would approve it? What happens if our main spokesperson isn't available? You'll find those gaps fast. So we call it tabletop exercises of running this scenario and from different viewpoints. Go to the next one here. And then from there, you create that pre-approved plan and what the messages you have. Again, no situation will be the same. You may have messages, very similar situation here a few weeks ago. You had messages under one situation for ICE activity at the facility. Didn't happen. It happened at a 3rd location, and there were other elements beyond what we thought it would be. So we quickly modified that. But you'll want to have a messaging, general messaging about the issue in place, then you could then quickly revise, edit, and update within an hour. We were able to do it within an hour because of that. And what would some of those things be? You want to be factual. You want to be brief. You want to be human. You want to avoid speculating about the status or the legal implications. We're aware of the situation, cooperating fully with authorities. We're hoping for, we support fair and lawful employment practices. We hope for a solution to the labor situation here. We're gathering information. Those core statements that you would say, have your plan, what you would do, who would say it, and what some of those messaging elements would be.
Eric, I'm going to jump in for a
Yes,
second
please.
just to say,
Yes, Rebekah.
I think this is such an important point, your last point, tying back to what Kelly said. These can be very emotionally charged situations. They can be very, very stressful moments. And particularly if someone you have, let's say there's a scenario where, unbeknownst to you, somebody who's been working in your plant for 20 years is taken into custody. You may have big feelings about that. Your team may have big feelings about that. And it's so important to stick to what Eric's saying on that slide, right? About factual, brief, human, but not necessarily emotional either, right? And written is sometimes better than verbal, right, Eric?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. The other thing that's very important too is everyone's watching, and you actually it's sometimes it's part of the tabletop exercise. Often it's part of your plan too. But know who your audiences are. Know who will be important, And once you start writing it down, you'll start to realize there are people here that maybe I hadn't been thinking about that I want to address in this situation. Obviously, your employees, almost in every situation, with few exceptions, your employees are your primary audience, and you want to communicate accurately and with empathy to them. Your customers, up and down your supply chain, you want to reassure that your operations are stable, that safety is key. Community advocacy groups, local officials, that's a key audience as well. They will fill the silence if you don't. This third one here is especially with this situation, is something that you have to be very cognizant of in your planning. Sometimes it will make sense to communicate to them, sometimes it won't. But almost always we're seeing in this situation is that the advocacy groups have a voice at the table, and they will be quoted in the story. Sometimes they'll be talking about you. So it's very important to be very thoughtful. Every situation will be different, but ensuring that you're communicating to these individuals if it makes sense. Otherwise, they will be out there talking on your behalf. And then the fourth, I'm a PR person. And media is not always your first audience. So we'll talk about this a little bit. I'm going to speed it up a little bit here too, because I know that we're running into Q&A time. You'll have a copy of this. What to communicate? Very similar to Kelly. Notify your attorney immediately. Get your crisis team together. Reassure employees that you're following legal steps. Keep the operations calm. Issue holding statements if you need to. If you don't have the facts yet, you can issue a statement saying, we're looking into this. We look to have more information for you soon. Then we'll go to the last step here. Well, almost the last step. What not to communicate. It's okay to say we're still gathering information. You don't have to give everything out at one time. If you don't know everything, you don't have to speculate at all. Another situation here too, the last bullet, we see this situation a lot. Sometimes the issue may not affect you specifically, or maybe you're on that supply chain, but it's not affecting you specifically, but media are reaching out to you. Resist the desire to comment, because not everyone is talking about this unless they're impacted directly. And if you do comment to media on this, there will be more stories and other media will come to you, and then you may find yourself fielding 5 or 6 or 7, and you're becoming a spokesperson of an issue that you may not be exactly directly involved with. Then we'll go to the last one here. Again, securing an outside comms partner. We talked about this. Your lawyer will protect you legally. Your communicator will protect your reputation. We always recommend having, obviously you have an outside legal representation, an outside communications representation as well, because they will come to this a bit more objectively, and a bit more in tune with who some of the audiences are, especially with media. Very important here too, if legal and PR during the crisis situation disagree, and I say this as a PR person, default to legal, but comms can help shape the messaging, making sure that it's a human values-based tone, but always default to legal, especially in this situation, in a crisis situation. And then we'll quickly recap here. This is your checklist. Recapping, have your team do tabletop scenario planning, have draft statements, train 2 spokespeople, know who your stakeholders are, and ensure that you have outside advisors to help you in a situation like this. We'll open up for Q&A, but thank you all very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Eric. Really appreciate that great information. We're going to move into Q&A now. I want to make sure we get to as many questions as we can in our time frame. So we'll kick things right off with this first one. I want to have this written down in our company's plan. If ICE shows up without a judicial warrant, what exactly should we say and do to protect our rights without escalating the situation? Kelly, I think this is a perfect fit for you to answer.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because we don't want to antagonize any government official, right? We don't want to think we're hiding something, but we do need to be cognizant of our operations, our employees, our safety issues. So my rule of thumb is a polite, I'm sorry, I'm not authorized to allow you to enter that area without a judicial warrant, is really all you need to say. If they push back, which is common, you can point to food safety issues, employee safety issues, their own safety issues. I think your industry has an even better argument than most to say, hey, we'd really like to, but we'd be violating XYZ rules and biohazard issues.
Okay.
I think that's a great point and one that has been useful in other scenarios, but do, have your staff be prepared for that pushback. It's not antagonistic to repeat yourself. And sometimes that's the best way to handle it too. Our next question here, do you have any advice on how to balance training employees on this topic without triggering unnecessary fear in our workplace? I think this is a great question in that, the more we talk about this, the more we're prepared, but the more we're talking about this, the more some people will feel anxious about it and might feel like, is this a place I still want to work, no matter who the employer is. So, Kelly, Eric, do you have thoughts on how to handle that?
Well, I'll take a stab and then turn over to you, Eric. I think it's really important to train the people that would be on your response team. And really important that your frontline people, receptionists, security, et cetera, know the plan and are trained and practiced in it. We do have clients that want to provide training or at least information to their entire workforce. But I don't think it's necessarily, hey, here's exactly what you need to do when ICE shows up. It's everyone, we know your concern. Please be aware, we have a plan. We've consulted with our attorneys. Please try not to worry about it. And as a reminder, please keep your documentation on your person at all time if you happen to be a non-US citizen. So I think I kind of a two-pronged training approach to that.
Yeah,
And
Eric?
go ahead. To add to that too, definitely, Kelly, Rebecca, agree with your responses. I think too, it's almost unavoidable. It's almost a no-win situation here. But before you do the training with the people who will be trained, perhaps get their buy-in, like ask what they would like to know. Say, we're going to address this issue with you as part of our planning. What would you like to know? Getting their buy-in may help ease some of the fear as well. They'll feel like they're part of what you've created.
And for those of you who may not have a budget for training on this, because not everybody will, I think, again, some of the advice that Kelly provided, which is to maybe use resources that are already accessible. I did put in the chat links to the National Immigration Law Center, which has some really useful fact sheets in a lot of different languages. And in some cases, cards that are printable that can be provided to employees. It may also be something that you'd want to notify your farms about because they may not be thinking about what resources exist for them. So up and down the supply chain, there are resources no matter your budget. If you have a $0 budget for this, there are still resources available to you and to your employees that you can make available to them in a pretty easy way. Let's move on to the next question because they're all coming in the chat now too, and I want to make sure beyond the pre-submitted ones, we get to everybody else's. I've heard some federal officials say that E-Verify can't be trusted. We saw that in the news, or isn't enough. Are employers expected to do more than participate in a government-run vetting program? And where do I start?
I'll jump in here because I've been dealing with E-Verify since it was a little baby pilot program. So I can say the E-Verify program is far more reliable than it used to be. There have been some issues, especially this year, with the various TPS and parole program revocations, so that sometimes when you're looking at E-Verify, it might seem like something's revoked and not revoked. So it's not 100%, but I still think you could be confident in the results you get. There is no law right now to expand E-Verify use among employers. So for the most part, it is optional to use the E-Verify program. Everyone has to do I-9s, but unless you are a federal contractor or unless you're in a state that requires E-Verify, you do not have to use E-Verify. If you want to use it, it's a pretty simple to use program right now. You take a tutorial, you sign an MOU, but be prepared. There are extra steps to it. I mean, if you get a mismatch back, there's certain steps you have to take. You have to have everyone trained on how to use it. So it is something that you should take seriously if you decide you want to do it. Also know it's not 100%. People will come back as work verified that aren't work verified if they're using someone else's identity and documents. So it's not foolproof in that respect.
Maybe an internal audit on I-9 is even more broadly useful. And again, if you can get to a place where you have an external partner check those for you, a law firm, I think Kelly's law firm does that too. So I think that that's something that might be a good starting place, even with a very low budget allocation for it. But just know you'll get information from that, and then you're required to take action on the information that you receive. So something for you to think about as well. Next question. If news reporters arrive during or after an ICE action, oh, alert, Eric, this one's for you. What should we say or not say to protect both employees and our business? I think you touched on this in your presentation, but maybe good just to remind and underline.
Thank you. Yes, again, we covered it a little bit, but it's don't speculate, project calmness, share the facts, be okay with an issue, having a holding statement saying we're gathering more information on this. We don't have an answer for you right now. Avoid speculation, avoid getting emotional, although because it can be very emotional. Don't take a political stance or anything of that, lest you just you give oxygen to a fire that's already smoldering. But be as factual as you can, be as brief as you can, because so much of it is happening so quickly. And never say no comment. That's a terrible, just say, hey, I just don't have this information right now. I'm gonna try to get more information for you as soon as possible.
When people are watching the recording of this, just like press pause on Eric's one slide that noted some sample ideas. Frankly, a copy and paste to that is a really good base start. Thanks so much, Eric, for that free advice. We appreciate it. And this one might be a little bit for you too, Eric. How can an employer rebuild trust with workers and the community after having an immigrations related issue that becomes public?
It's a wonderful question, and I'll answer it with two different answers that will complement each other. And the first one is the question is right on it. Rebuilding trust. It will take time if you do have to rebuild trust. Communicate your plan. Tell people what you're going to do. Tell people how you're going to address it. Have milestones within there, and keep people posted about it. Keep people updated. Okay, in the next 3 months, we're going to be doing this. We're gonna ensure this doesn't happen. We're gonna change this policy. We're gonna do this, and then provide those updates as it stands. The second thing, though, to keep in mind, and it's good advice for any organization, is the first time that, and I saw the list of who's on this call, and I know everyone are wonderful community participants, but the best advice too is to already have been an active supporter of your community, already have a strong reputation in your community. The first time an organization, people should be hearing you in the news, shouldn't be on an ICE raid. They should already know who you are. They should already know the value, the wonderful value that you provide to the community, to the supply chain, to the state. So always have a good, ongoing, proactive, positive public and community relations in place. So when something like this happens, you'll take a dent, but it won't crack you, and you'll be able to more quickly rebuild that trust after the situation.
Thanks, Eric. Now we're going to go to the live chat here. We have 3 final questions to try to get through in the time remaining here. The first one I think is for you, Kelly. Are the legal requirements and your tips the same regardless of the size of the business or the type of employee? So that means farm site, processing plant. Is it about the same no matter how big or what you're doing?
Yeah, the overall advice is the same. What looks different is the plan. Right. So if I'm making a plan for my corporate headquarters, that plan is going to look different than the plan for my facility, which is going to look different than maybe my farm that's supplying me. So who to contact, where to wait, those are all going to be specific to a location. But overall advice remains the same.
This next one's kind of a sensitive question, and I think maybe case specific, but do employees make themselves vulnerable or more vulnerable by, let's say, withholding for taxes, not withholding for taxes, suggesting that they might not file or pay them? I think, I don't know if I would make that assumption, but are there any materials that an employer could provide to clarify to them requirements and risks about making a move like that? Kelly, has this been something that's ever come up for you?
Yeah, it has. As an employer, take care of your own withholdings, withhold what you need to withhold, whether they pay taxes or not properly, no one knows. Even your US citizen workers, we don't know that. So I wouldn't get involved in any advice or non-advice related to that. They should know if the issue comes up, they should know that failing to file taxes, providing fake documents in an I-9, claiming to be a US citizen when they're not, those things can make it much harder to correct immigration status if they're able to do so. So if I'm married to a US citizen, I'd typically be able to get a green card, even if I've been here without documentation for a few years. If I've claimed to be a US citizen though, it's much harder, much harder. So that I think that's the warning.
Thanks, Kelly. This last one's a very quick answer, I think, but also coming to you. When we are labeling areas private, does that signage need to be on the doors or next to the doors of entry? Any specifics around that?
No, this is a very gray area of law. It's that expectation of privacy. So if it's on the door, that's fine. If it's above the door, that's probably fine. But when a stranger is coming in and looking at it, are they going to understand that's an area they can't go into? That's what we're looking for.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And with that, we've come to the end of the Q&A in the chat, so I'll hand it back to Grace.
All right, thank you very much, Rebekah. I want to also thank Kelly and Eric for joining us today and sharing their time and their valuable expertise and insights with us. We appreciate it a great deal. I want to give one final reminder that we will send out a link to a recording of this webinar, as well as resources, helpful contact information, all of that afterwards. So please watch for that in the next day or so in an email from me. And then I want to put in one quick plug for our next upcoming WCMA member webinar in November, Thursday, November 6th at 1 p.m. Central. We're going to cover everything you need to know about participating in the World Championship Cheese Contest. So that's just 2 days after the entry period for that contest opens. So if you're thinking about entering, you'll want to mark this date and time on your calendar. Make sure you join us. We'll walk through everything you need to know. Thank you so much again for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you being here to learn with us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out anytime, and we'll see you on our next webinar. Thank you.